Hi, I'm Gary Striegler, and this is, I think, the fourth video that I'm shooting on using a miter saw. Now, this video is just going to be some tips that I picked up over the years. So, the first tip that I want to share is pretty simple. Sometimes when you're cutting some smaller pieces and you can't get a stop that's exactly the way you want to for repetitive cuts, most of the time I'd have some sort of a stand with a stop where I could really make repetitive cuts. But say those pieces get down within an inch or two long, maybe a couple inches long, it can be hard to get a stop to work for that. So sometimes I'll put just a little bit of blue masking tape on the fence, and then I can just put a pencil mark. I can get probably within a 32nd of an inch doing that. So for instance, if I needed to cut, say, 5 or 6 pieces that are exactly this long, I just put a little pencil mark right there and make that cut, and I could just slide over and cut another one exactly the same. Now, another tip that I just demonstrated is it's a great idea. The safest, the best practice is whenever you make a cut, leave the saw down until the blade stops, because especially if you're kind of smaller piece like this, as you raise it up, it can tend to get into the blade and launch a piece. So that's one of my first tips. Now, I also tend to cut pieces of trim and then go test the fit to see how they work out. And sometimes I might put that piece up there and go, oh, I need to take maybe a little bit off the bottom of this cut to make it work. And this is a pretty straightforward tip, but generally, instead of beveling my saw head this way, I'll simply do something like that. I'll put some sort of a shim underneath one edge. If I need to take some off the top, I might put that shim here. Now, the shim doesn't have to be as thick as a pencil. It could be any little ripping of wood or something, but I can put that shim there, and then when I lower down the saw, I look, slide the piece of trim over against the blade, and I can see how much I'm going to take off either the top or the bottom, because there'll be a gap at the bottom or the top, and that gap is going to basically amount to how much I'm going to cut off when I make the cut. Now, I can't remember whether I've shared this or not, but it's really a good one, so I want to share it again. You know, anytime that I want to take just a little bit off of a piece, I'll lower the saw down, and I'm going to slide the molding over against the plate of the blade. Just hold it firmly there. When I come up and come back down, I'm going to take off the amount that the carbide sticks past the plate. So I can pretty easily take off like a 32nd, maybe even a 64th, that way pretty accurately. So this is a great tip. You know, I talked about in my previous videos that you probably don't want to get your hands any closer than 3 inches to the blade to be safe. But what if I have this little piece of molding and I need to take about a 1/16 of an inch off of it? You know, instead of just throwing it away and going and getting another one, I can do this. Got a piece of wood right here. I'm just going to take a headless pinner, put a couple headless pins in. So now that piece is being held, and I can come right in there, make that cut without my hands being, 3 or 4 inches away from the blade. So I can take a small piece and headless pin it to a bigger piece and safely take a little bit off. And then, headless pins aren't too terribly hard to get loose, except this one's going to be. But usually I can pop them off, twist them off. Now, another thing about headless pins, doesn't have anything to do with the miter saw, but always wiggle those nails back and forth and they'll break off below the surface. Don't take a pair of pliers or something and try and cut them off, because you're always going to leave a little bit above the surface. So you always want to get a hold of them and wiggle them back and forth, and they'll break off almost always below the surface. So a lot of times when I'm cutting small moldings like base shoe, I have problems with maybe the piece trying to go into the opening in the fence. All miter saws have to have an opening in the fence or a throat to allow for beveling and things like that. But if I'm cutting small moldings or like this panel mold, and I need to cut a really small piece, a miter return is like the perfect example of this. I can take a piece of wood and nail two pieces together, just scraps. Now, the secret to this is this saw, like almost all other saws, has a little stop system that's adjustable to where I can adjust where this cut is going to stop. If you look, that's not going all the way down into the bed of the saw, but it doesn't have to because I've got this extra 3/4 of an inch. So I would set up like so, then just take I could even cut a tiny, tiny little piece. So I just cut a piece. There's no way I could cut that piece without it going flying away if I didn't have this insert in here. Now, if you're going to be going back and forth each direction, you probably need to have one for the right-hand cut and for the left-hand cut. But one of the things I always try and do also, if I'm cutting repetitive pieces, going to cut a whole bunch of one pieces, is I'll try to make like all my left-hand miters first and then go back and make all my right-hand ones. It doesn't always work, but it's still a good kind of a rule to keep in mind. So this is kind of a trick that I'll use sometimes. Doesn't have a ton of applications, but so I want to ask you to use your imagination. Imagine that this piece of wood is a stair tread. And a lot of times on jobs, we'll have to adjust for miter return on stair tread ourselves in the field. So you've got a square end and you need to make that cut where the miter return is going to be. You can do that using a miter saw if you work from the back side. So far I've cut over to where this cut on the bottom side intersects with this miter. Now what I want to do is come out and I'm going to cut through from the back side. Actually, changing my plan, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to space it over. Hopefully this will be enough of the space over. I'm going to space it over and cut it from this side. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Because I didn't have enough length on my saw from the other way, but by putting a spacer here, I can actually come around and make the cut right back from this direction. One thing I forgot, I want to go back to cutting full depth. So there I'd have a place where I could put my return piece that would cover the end grain for a miter return. That's just by spacing it off the back fence and then making a plunge cut down. One other real quick thing, a saw curve can actually be a decorative detail. Like this piece of 3.5 inch material would represent a piece of casing, or it could even represent, say, a frieze piece that was going to be under a mantel shelf or even under a crown detail. Now I can come in and make a decorative cut. I'm going to flip this back, and I think I'm going to try and screw this down probably a little further. It's too much. All right, that should work. So now I can make a saw cut. I need to space it off of the fence. Anytime that you're using that plunge stop to get a complete cut, you're probably going to have to space it off the fence. So I I can make whatever kind of detail I want. I could just keep making these every 1 inch, or I've done them where I just made a couple of them at the top and a couple at the bottom on a casing detail. But at any rate, today for craftsman style or the kind of contemporary trim details, a lot of times the saw curve is an excellent option. So this probably isn't all the trim tricks or the miter saw tricks that I know, but it's some that I studied and thought about and I wanted to share. I hope that these will be helpful to you. And if you like this information, this content, please go check out the rest of the stuff on my YouTube channel, and also think about subscribing to my channel. Thanks.